Cloud and Clear, the podcast by SADA for innovative business leaders and technology enthusiasts, where we explore how Google Cloud is transforming the industry and what that means to you. Now, here's your host, Tony Safoian.
All right, I'm very excited and happy today to have a very special guest. He's the founder and CEO of Qubole. And welcome to Cloud and Clear, Ashish Thusoo.
Thanks, Tony. Glad to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
I'm really excited because there's so many things that connect us. Obviously, both being Google partners, you being on the tech side, us being on the go-to-market resell technical side. You're also a SADA customer, which is fantastic. One of our favorite and endearing SADA alumni, Aaron Friedman, is there now at Qubole as well. So,
yeah. And he's been awesome. He's fantastic.
I was going to ask you, for the record on our podcast, how's Aaron doing? Is he doing a good job?
I think it's fantastic. I mean, I love the guy, he's full of energy, always pushing hard. Couldn't have asked a better person to be our interface with Google. And so all fantastic.
I'm very proud of our alumni. So now he knows. Now he knows. We're giving him a live shout out on our podcast together. So Ashish, tell me a little bit more about your background before we jump into Qubole. I really like to understand, and we haven't talked at length before, so it's this is our way of getting to know one another too. And you have a super interesting background. Worked in some incredible places, but do you want to tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, happy to do that. So before I started Qubole, this company's Qubole was started in 2011, so it's been about 8.5 years. Since we started it. But most of my background has been in the data industry. So I started off working at Oracle in the heydays of Oracle when databases were I worked on data warehouses, so built out a lot of data warehousing systems.
Yeah.
Then I had good fortune to be at Facebook after that.
I saw that.
And a lot of what has become mainstream today, what we call data lakes, was invented there as part of my team. I was involved. I was fortunate enough to be there early on when many of these paradigms were being just set up.
Right.
And did that, built out data infrastructure at Facebook, did a bunch of open source projects there. So got deep understanding of what is a data lake, how it is different from data warehouse. And then in 2011, we set out to start Qubole. So most of my background has been in tech, heavily into the data space. I've been in the ecosystem for more than 20 years around data and data processing technologies. And then Qubole was the first startup that I did with my partner in crime, Joydeep.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, we've been happily charging and trying to bring our vision to the world. Around data lakes and so on and so forth.
You were very early in, understanding the value of data, but also the challenges, right? I mean, it's not coincidental that companies like Facebook and I'm sure Google and others sort of in the consumer space were the first ones to face the types of volume of data and also the very specific business need to make that data meaningful and actionable, real time. It's no coincidence, right? Hundreds of millions of users and a very active platform. So it's companies like Facebook certainly, and of course Google, kind of hit those challenges before anybody did.
Yeah. I mean, these companies were at the very frontier of the change that happened with data in the 2000s. So the basic change that happened is, in the 90s, when data warehousing was invented, most of the data used to be coming from business processes. Mm-hmm. So we had in the 70s and the 80s and 90s, we spent a lot of time automating business processes. We used to get data from our, inventory management systems, retail systems and so on and so forth. And that was the data being processed in data warehouse. Mm-hmm. In the 2000s, with the internet going more mainstream and with the invention of devices, and the invention of social media, the data changed its structure. It became very interactive, very voluminous, multifaceted. You would have tweets, you would have images, you would have status updates, very different from just the business process data. And these companies, Facebooks and the Googles of the world, were at the very frontier of this revolution. So they got to see those data sets for the first time. A lot of their product models were built on actually taking that data and creating advanced models out of that data to drive engagement. A lot of their monetization models were built on using data to drive targeting. So data, basically, if you think about Google and Facebook, these companies, yes, they offer a particular platform to the users, but they're extremely data driven. Extremely data. So we joined, Facebook, both myself and Joydeep joined Facebook in 2007. That was when this revolution was just beginning. And so
the iPhone came out in 2007.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's when all this revolution was very beginning. And the next 4 years, we saw things change dramatically in the landscape of how data should be treated. I have seen generations of companies come and go, and some grow, some go away because shifts happened because of this. We got to see what a data lake means, what it can do, how complex it is. And that's you're right. These companies were at the very frontier of that revolution.
Look, it's very clear who's going to win in this fourth industrial revolution with regards to which companies will be left standing from the old paradigm, who will continue to thrive and use their institutional and structural advantage to, fight off all the sort of startups. And it's going to be the ones who are able to utilize data the best at the end of the day. I mean, there's no debate about that.
There's no debate about that. I think in this day and age, data is the new oil. If you're not using your data assets, then you are actually doing disservice to yourself, to your ecosystem, and you will eventually wither away because every there's another company that is being data driven, and
100 of them. There's 100 startups. For every industrial Fortune 100, there's 100 startups who are extremely well funded, who are trying to disrupt their space. It's just, we know because you and I serve both of them. We serve those startups, and then we serve the Fortune 500. We see it.
Good news is that now, I think, if you think about this data revolution, say it started off in 2005-ish, 2006, the data lakes. The last 10 years have been predominated by these startups. But I now see some of these, the other companies catching up and learning from that, and agreeing with the hypothesis that if they don't use data, then they will get disrupted. And literally, we are seeing that in our sales pipeline. We are seeing the type of customers that we are bringing in the last couple of years. Distinctly, this data lake market, as we call it, is moving from what used to be the early adopters to the early majority. And that's a fantastic sign that people are adapting to it.
Look, so our audience is very broad. Just like me, I'm on the sort of somewhat on the spectrum with regards to my technical acumen and understanding of this technology. And one of my favorite things about having guests like yourself, which are one of the paramount experts in what we're talking about, is to kind of educate the audience on what's going on, right? And I want to go back to Oracle for a minute because I think, their claim to fame is the relational database. So SQL, the relational, that was revolutionary at the time, but all of a sudden, data structure wasn't so clear anymore. And actually relational databases started to break down under the volume of this data, and all this sort of NoSQL sort of stuff started happening, etc. So I think that's a super interesting paradigm shift. But you're really passionate about creating a distinction between a data warehouse and data lake in your communication and go-to-market and market education. So can you talk about that paradigm shift and what it really means in like the simplest terms?
Yeah, happy to do that. So if you think about how most data-driven companies, and I'm talking about the Facebooks and the Netflixes and Lyfts of the world, they use data for 3 different types of applications. One set of applications is looking at the past. So you have the historical data, and you want some dashboards and reporting of the past. The second set of applications is looking at the present. As the data is coming in real time, you're processing it, and you are making decisions based on that. And the third part is looking into the future, which is where they're developing models to recommend things or predict things for the future. So those are the three applications of data. The first one, which is around looking at the past, is what is predominated by data warehouses and BI. Traditional BI,
Right.
all of that industry that emerged in the 90s is all dominating that. That is where you see, companies like Teradata make their mark, and that is where you see, companies, Snowflakes is squarely in that space, Redshift is squarely in that space, and so on and so forth. Now, these other set of applications, which is around looking at data as it is coming in, and also doing model generation for data science, that application substrate has become a data lake. That is what is data lake. That drives.
Why do they call it a data lake?
It is called a data lake. Very good question. It's called a data lake because in the case of a data lake, all the data that you collect is dumped in raw formats. So there is no preparation. If you think about data warehouse, the paradigm in data warehouse was you get all the raw data. These could be CSV files, text files, whatever. Then you run what is called an ETL process, which is extract, transform, and load the data to give them a structure, and then that structure would get loaded into a data warehouse.
I remember data cubes, right? All this stuff, right? Yeah.
Very structured, because you're taking all the raw data and you're processing it and refining it and then putting that structure into data.
And it might take days in the past or weeks. It would take a long time to perform these processes, right?
It could take a long time. Plus, suddenly, and it would take a long time. But when you are reporting on the past, those things don't matter as much. But when you are doing things in real time, and when you're creating models for predicting the future, then you need not just that refined data, but you need all of the data, because you don't know which data set you would use, which you would discard. So data lakes emerged in which all the data in its raw format was dumped. So there was no ETL process. The paradigm of data engineering completely changed. All the data is available there. In the data lake, it was not just SQL users, but programmatic users would also come in. So you would have SQL interface into a data lake to do ad hoc analysis, but you would have programmatic Python-based interface, or Apache Spark has become very popular, or TensorFlow is becoming very popular for deep learning. You would have all these interfaces available on a single platform, but working off of raw data. And when the users of these different interfaces, so first of all, there are different personas coming in, and when they would need more data or different types of data, they would do continuous data engineering. They essentially, because all the raw data is there, it's not like a warehouse where there's some structured data which is present and the raw data has been discarded. All the raw data is there. They're doing continuous data engineering. So there was this paradigm shift. That is why it's called a data lake. It is differentiated from data warehouse because all the raw data is stored. The data is stored in raw formats. There is more than SQL that happens on these things. And in terms of data engineering, it is continuous data engineering. There's not a waterfall ETL process. I think that is why there's a distinction. That is why I carve that out as a distinction between what is a data warehouse and what is a data lake. By the way, our position is that the companies need both. It is not one or the other. For traditional, BI and all that stuff, data warehouse is fantastic. Go use, Redshift, Snowflake, whatever you want to use. But when it comes to data lakes, then you need a different platform, and that is where Qubole plays, and that is where you have Dataprog, and there are a whole bunch of other, products in that space.
So what does Qubole bring to the table that you feel, again, you had this vision years ago and you might have pivoted a couple of times. I don't know, you've been around a very long time, but what is Qubole's perspective? What does it offer to the market that's very unique? And as a result of your experiences, then I want to talk about the trends that you're seeing with your customers.
So Qubole's vision, fortunately, has stayed the same since we started. It doesn't happen much know the things change so rapidly that it doesn't happen much, and companies have to pivot and so on and so forth. But the vision when we started off, we thought that data lakes are going to go mainstream. That vision has changed, has remained the same throughout. What has changed is, the market has become more mainstream. So in the early days of Qubole, for example, we would sell to what were called the data native companies or the cloud native companies. They were very advanced companies like of the worlds and stuff like that. Now we are, as I mentioned, that data lake market is moving from those early adopters to an early majority. And the needs for the early majority is around simplicity, enterprise grade platform, open platform, and efficiency. That is what they want.
Yes.
The early majority is all about tinkering. Give me control, give me the open source project, that open source project, and so on and so forth. So in response to that, we have also we have heavily focused. Our platform has essentially focused heavily on number one being open. So everything in Qubole adheres to the fact that adheres to the principle that the data and the metadata is all in open formats. So there's no lock-in, no vendor lock-in. The API processing frameworks are all open source standards. So there's no vendor lock-in from that perspective. And the platform is also agnostic in terms of where you want to run it, on whichever cloud you want to run it. So that is openness. That's very important. The second part is being enterprise grade platform. What that means is a lot of focus in Qubole has been around automating operations. So you don't need experts to run this stuff. A lot of focus in Qubole has been in building consumption tools. So we have things like notebooks built into a platform. We have connectors to Tableau and the Lookers of the worlds to come to a platform, just to simplify consumption. They should come from the interfaces that they have. They should come there in a simple way. Governance is a big part of enterprises, whether it is cost governance or whether it is security as to who sees what data and stuff like that. All of that is built into the Qubole platform. And the third part then comes is when we are very good at scale, because when we have enterprise deployments which have more than 4,000 users worldwide.
That's a lot.
And such a big scale, and you have all different types of workloads, data science workloads, data engineering workloads, analytics workloads coming onto this data lake. Costs and efficiency, both scale as well as efficiency becomes important. And that is also a place where we do very, very well. The infrastructure, we can typically cut down that by about 50%. So those are the three things. But in a nutshell, we have really focused on how to simplify how to take out the complexity from a data lake, so that enterprise users and these early majority users can use it and get the same benefits that companies like Lyft's and the Facebooks and the Netflixes of the world have been doing for years. And that's really what I'm doing.
That's fantastic. Yeah, look, I think cloud in general has democratized capability, and that's one of the reasons you have 100 startups competing for every sort of market, because the barrier to entry with regards to technology just essentially doesn't exist, partly because of the broad scale public cloud providers, but also partly because of solutions like Qubole, which is sort of compressing the algorithm with regards to experience and engineering capability and data science capability. Like, you're shortening the path for so many of your customers that they can get to somewhere within weeks or months what it took another company 5 years to achieve.
That is very true. And cloud has been a partner for us since day one. Qubole is a cloud company. All of this stuff we've built, the entire platform is a cloud platform. And you're absolutely right. Cloud was built on enabling agility for businesses. In the data center world, everything was slow. I remember when I was building out this infrastructure at Facebook, even for a company like Facebook, we had to wait months to get the hardware.
Yeah.
So it was a process, and God help you if the demand was always there, and demand was always outstripping the supply, and it was very hard. With the cloud, that entire dynamic changed.
We work with customers that we need to run complex migration processes or whatever, and especially in the enterprise, it still sort of boggles our mind when we're like, okay, we need these type of machines they're like, okay, great, 4 weeks for that. Or can you open these ports on the firewall? They're like, we'll put in a ticket. 2 weeks from now, we'll open those ports. I'm like, what are you talking about?
The brilliance of the cloud was that all these physical things, they change into an API call.
Exactly. Like networking is software, security is software, infrastructure is software, infrastructure is code, right? It's pretty amazing.
So that is what the substrate we built on. And, we just made sure that the data lake experience became even simpler using all the goodness that cloud provides.
So in 2011 or 2012-ish, you said you were sort of born in the cloud yourself. So was it just AWS back then, or what did it run on first?
We, as with everyone else, we started on AWS. 2011 was basically AWS. This was even before AWS came out public with their numbers. I think I distinctly remember the world changed for us in 2014. But then very early on, we also envisioned that the cloud world is going to diversify. It is, back then, I think it was the whole IT infrastructure market was like a $600 billion industry. It's impossible for a single vendor and to satisfy that industry. And plus, I think everybody needed choice.
I agree.
Yeah, very early on, we then went to Azure. We did start working with GCP back in the day. And then in the last 2 years, we have really focused on deepening our relationship with GCP and building strong partnership there. We are, as you know, we are one of the 7 tech partners, top tier tech partners with them.
There's only 7 and you're one of 7. I mean, that's pretty fantastic.
That's right. And we do a lot of work with them. We have a lot of good success with them. So that's how our cloud journey sort of evolved. Like with everybody else, it was AWS first, and then it evolved with the other clouds. And with GCP, we are particularly doing a lot of good, strong strategic work.
What have you seen a change in terms of the demand? I mean, there's sort of a market demand, and there's the technology itself, right? There's could be a couple of different drivers for your, I think, accelerated investment in GCP as a platform and as a partnership with Google Cloud. What has driven those deepening investments?
There are few things, actually. Number one, I think each of these cloud vendors, by the way, have their strengths and their weaknesses. GCP's particular strength is analytics, and GCP's particular strength is the performance and efficiency of their hardware. They've spent a lot of basically what Google runs on. They've essentially brought that to the rest of the market. It's been built by very top class engineers and so on and so forth. So when we started talking to those teams, essentially we figured out that there are certain needs in that market that we can fulfill. For example, the need for a data lake platform, which is enterprise grade, which can support a lot of enterprise type of users, that was there. And so we started talking to their teams, and that's how that partnership sort of gelled with them. So, if you are looking for a platform which is simple to operate, which is simple to use, which has got, high amount of efficiency and so on and so forth, then the Google teams work with us to bring those use cases on GCP. And a lot of these use cases are actually moving from on-prem to the cloud, because I think increasingly people are realizing that it's so much simpler.
Yeah, absolutely.
Easier to do this on the cloud than on-prem stuff. And that's where we are essentially deepening the partnership. So I think it was both the market demand because of the good work that GCP has done in analytics as well as in hardware efficiencies. And it was also the fact that we could help in certain areas, in certain use cases on the GCP ecosystem itself, which led to that work.
Yeah, we have several tech enablement companies like Qubole as customers, and one of our first was Reltio, and they're in the MDM space, right? And I think it was kind of one of our first GCP deals that was meaningful in ambition and scale, and we learned a lot with them, and they're still our great customer. And what they were telling us even back then, and of course they're kind of uniquely for their retail customers, this was specifically true, but they were actually getting customers demanding to be on GCP or wanting to be on GCP or not wanting another option. Are you seeing customers, your own customers saying, we want to run on GCP or we have GCP? Are you seeing an increase in that kind of motion?
Most certainly that is happening. I think, and we have seen this market, since last 8 years. The first 4 years, say from 2011, say till 2015 or 16, not much pull was happening for GCP.
Right.
But in the last 2-3 years, a lot of pull has happened, including clients who have been on other clouds saying that we want to diversify or we want to move certain things over. So we have seen that, and we have also seen clients, net new clients, who are essentially coming from on-prem and saying that GCP is what they want to go with. So there's certainly, we see that in a pipeline, we see that in our customer base. We have a lot of successful customers on GCP now than what we had even a year back.
Yeah.
And all of that is testament to the fact that there is definitely market demand, market pull for GCP that has built up, and that is healthy for the entire cloud ecosystem as well.
Yeah, no, we're seeing similar things, but of course we kind of live in a somewhat of a bubble, and we're somewhat biased. Obviously, we're seeing our growth rates and the increase in demand, but it's interesting to always speak with our partners and customers who run a very somewhat agnostic approach, which I think, by the way, is the right approach, to kind of get a pulse of what they're doing. And I agree with you. Look, the world will be a multi-cloud world. It will be a hybrid world for a very long time. There's technical reasons for that. There's business, commercial reasons for that. There's regulatory reasons for that, all sorts of reasons. And I actually appreciate Google's posture and position on this subject, because I think they're the most bold with Anthos and that whole strategy of saying, look, we want to build the best operating pane of glass, the best operating platform for all clouds, including being on premise. And we think we're the best, but we want to earn that business. Like, you move it to GCP when you want to, but meanwhile, run it anywhere you want. I just love the confidence and the commitment to openness, which is very important for you at Qubole as well. It's just such a, I don't know. I just love that that market approach.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Actually, Kubernetes is another thing which has really changed the world.
Yes. Invented at Google, by the way, and open source to the world. Yes.
That's absolutely right. And we used to think, back when we started Qubole, we had this vision that, we'll focus on cloud architecture, which means compute is automated. It's an API call. Everything is an API call. So storage and compute are separated out. And so you can do a lot of flexible things, a lot of automation and stuff like that. We used to always be on a lookout of, okay, how is that going to, will that architecture go into the data center someday? And there were a lot of, things which came, and, there was, there were a lot of open source projects, bunch of open source projects that came. OpenStack was one. I think Kubernetes has really made that possible now.
Totally.
The same sort of agility that I was talking to you about, like when in Facebook, you used to wait for months, many times months. Even for Facebook, was a very agile company, fast moving company. I can just shudder to imagine what would happen in other enterprises. But even there, you had to wait months to get hardware. With Kubernetes, I think the agility of the cloud can be brought into data centers as well.
Absolutely.
So cloud is, and Google has a front role to play there. Google is actually leading that transformation, where bringing the cloud or cloud-like architecture to make it pervasive, I think is a very, very bold move, and it's a fantastic thing for the market.
And not in a proprietary way, in an open way, which I think is the key. And Google understands this sort of better than anyone probably, of how important that is. And enterprises are getting super ambitious with Kubernetes. First, it was like, it's only for stateless stuff. And now people want to put non-stateless things in there. And I think obviously our capabilities in the platform and the stack has to evolve to support that. But it is panacea, I believe, for customers to have that level of flexibility, that level of confidence in their peaks and valleys of demand. And it's really exciting. And again, I'm super bullish on Anthos. We've invested a lot here. We're seeing all sorts of super interesting use cases. I can't talk about some of these customers, but they're talking about some amazing stuff that if it happens, it'll be like kind of once in a lifetime type of opportunities.
We have seen that demand as well, around Anthos, around Kubernetes. And I think that is yet another way in which obviously Google is changing the industry and the market. But it's also yet another way how cloud architecture is becoming pervasive.
Exactly.
And that is fantastic for all cloud vendors. That is fantastic for companies like us, which are cloud native. And that is most importantly fantastic for the customers because they're getting that agility which was lacking, and they can now make strategic choice of whether they want to be on a public cloud or they want to be on the cloud data centers.
And again, satisfy their board of directors, satisfy their regulatory environment, and all those things, which is amazing. Let me ask you more about the company itself. You're a co-founder, you're a CEO. We live in parallel, universes kind of together, and we've been, doing this now 19 years, but have evolved quite a bit. You've been on a singular mission that you've proved to be on the right side of history so far. And I think that's going to be something that continues for you as well. But what do you think about as you look forward in the next 5 years? What do you worry about the most?
We live in the tech space. And the thing about tech space is that things change very, very quickly. It used to be the case where it would take 20 years to build a company. It would last for another 20 years. This is the IBM era, right? And maybe more than that, right? Now things change every 3-4 years. So what I focus a lot on is how to continue charting the course for Qubole as the ecosystem changes. And as mentioned, we've been very lucky that our vision has not changed, that our direction has not changed. But over the years, we have had to make adjustments as the ecosystem changes. So I think that is the number one thing that we focus on. We have been very lucky here to have some great leaders who are thought leaders, who understand the space heavily. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about where is the market headed, where is the cloud headed, what is happening there, are there certain changes happening in the data lake market itself in terms of requirements and stuff like that. So we spend a lot of time on that, and so far we've been able to navigate that. So I think that is where I spend a lot of effort. The second part is about all said and done, data lakes are still now they're moving from early adopters to early majority. I want to continue to see that transformation happening, like in Jeffrey Moore's crossing the chasm analogy. From early majority it needs to get to late majority and stuff like that. So I've read about what can the company do, what can Qubole do as a company to help accelerate that transformation. Can we give help to our clients to help transform that, become more data driven, become more have a data lake architecture, do this on the cloud.
I think that's very important. I'm glad to hear you say that, because I feel like, yes, we're riding on the shoulders of major trends and riding on the shoulders of giants, etc. But we can't be passive and opportunistic. Like, we have to be out there creating the market, pushing the market forward. And it's a very different type of behavior than in the past, I think. And because of your market position, our market position, it's actually, I feel duty bound to help. I feel like the large enterprises need our help. It's an existential moment for them. And I feel like the startups need our help because what we tend to do is very suitable for their needs and what they can accomplish. And I almost look at it as a bigger mission of economic contribution, job creation, economic output, all those things. I feel like it's very tunnel vision to think like it's just about riding the wave.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. Since day one, Qubole, there are, back when I was on Facebook, there used to be this saying, I learned it there, but I think it's generally true, that there are missionary companies or mercenary companies. We are certainly a missionary company. We are on a goal. We have seen this transformation firsthand at Facebook, and we want to make sure that every company out there partakes into this transformation. I am 100% with you that we have a big role and a responsible role to play in driving this transformation. And all our folks at Qubole are aligned on that this is a transformation that we need to drive. And the things that we think about and talk about is how do we accelerate this transformation? What can we do to help our clients get the benefits of a data lake architecture? What can we do to help our clients to leverage the cloud architecture suitably to get there? How can we take the pain away and make them just focus on really the top line things, use the data for driving their top line or their bottom line, whatever the optimization is, whatever their business needs are. How can we use that to make that simpler so that they can focus there and we take away all the pain that is there in running these platforms or making these platforms available and so on and so forth.
Look, one of the key components of the economic realities of cloud and consumption economics and subscription economics is that we're forced to actually behave differently. We're forced to have to earn the right to keep our customers and grow our customers by providing value way beyond their first decision to adopt Qubole, for instance. And I love that it incents all the right behavior because it brings out the best in us. And we can't win unless our customers win. They won't continue unless there's ROI. They won't stay unless they feel extremely supported. So I think the customer experience is so vital. And I love that cloud has really brought this to the forefront for companies like us who relish on customer success, love technical account management, love client partner relationships, And I love this multi-year journey with our customers because I feel like when they achieve something and it's a Super Bowl commercial or it's some kind of a press release or it's an earnings report, I feel like we played a small role there and it's very fulfilling for me.
Yeah, same here. Absolutely true. And you're absolutely spot on. The cloud one is the technology innovation, but the business model innovation has been fantastic. And that has driven that behavior. There used to be the case where, in the licensing software case, there used to be a lot of shelfware.
You worked at Oracle. You know all about shelfware.
With the cloud model, you're right. You have to earn the trust every day. Every day you have to earn that trust. And that is the right incentive.
I love the pressure. I think it brings out the best in us. It is a mentality which I think you seem philosophically aligned naturally. And I feel that same way about my role and our role of our executive team and the type of people we attract here. And I think the best is yet ahead. I feel like we have a great duty and responsibility. And if we do it right, what I also see is relatively unlimited demand for cloud and solutions like Qubole for the next decade. The only question you and I have to solve for is how do we continue to become the supplier of choice and stay the supplier of choice? We're extremely blessed to be in a market where there's virtually unlimited demand, that the only thing you have to focus on is truly just execution.
Right place, right time, but you have to execute.
Thank you so much. We'll end on that very positive, amazing note. You've been a great guest. I've learned a lot about you, but also about data lakes. I look forward to being partners together and supporting each other in our joint journey. And I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Tony. This has been a fantastic conversation. And thank you for inviting me here. And I also learned a bunch of things here. So we are both in the same business of making our clients really, really successful. And we'll continue to look forward to partnering with you on that.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @Cloud&Clear and our website, sada.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.